Welcome to Metamorphosis Initiations, Thresholds, and the Alchemy of Becoming. I'm Vive, and I'm here alongside my co-weaver and collaborator, Kathleen. Hi, Kathleen.
Kia everyone.
So, we're devoted to reclaiming the sacred ways of meeting change, rooted in the wisdom of our bodies, ancestors, the universe, and of course, Mama Earth. In the summit, we're curious about what becomes possible when we stay present to the in between long enough for new patterns, meanings, and futures to emerge. So, today, Kathleen, is our standing stone as we dive into the richness of this conversation with a very dear friend of both Kathleen and I, Tayria Ward. Welcome, Tayria.
I am just so happy and delighted to be here with both of you. And I love the topic of your summit. I just think this is so valuable and important and timely. And so it's an honor to be with you.
Oh, and we cannot wait to speak to you. But I want to introduce Tayria Ward. She's PhD. She lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where she has a private practice offering dream analysis, psychological, and spiritual guidance to clients from all parts of the world, including Australia. Taria has worked intensively with her own and other people's dreams for more than 50 years, and for nearly 30 years has been an avid student of Indigenous ways of knowing and being. In addition to her one-to-one sessions with clients, Taria also conducts a monthly global community dream symposium where people from all over the world come to share their dreams and listen to the collective dreaming mind. She conducts small private dream groups and teaches to a wide audience in regular lectures and interviews. And she also offers private oracular readings upon request. Today, Taria is discussing with Kathleen and I when destiny designs your rite of passage, and I know she has a lot of stories relating to that. So, Taria, let's open it up with tell us why you chose this topic and what it means to you.
When I read, hello to your audience and greetings to everyone. It's such an honor to be with all of you. Um, when I read your subject, I got really excited about what you're talking about. It's what is it? Initiations, thresholds, and the alchemy of becoming. And so the thing that immediately came to my mind as I considered what you were holding space for in this summit was my very deep interest in the indigenous ways of rites of passage. And when I have a PhD in depth psychology, as you mentioned, but the focus of my doctoral work was on reawakening indigenous sensibilities in the Western psyche. And really, a big focus of one full chapter of the dissertation was called The Language of Ritual. And it's about how essential and important to the indigenous ways that that we receive the initiations through ritual and rites of passage. And I became very, very intrigued with working with that. And I will say, not only through my studies of working with anthropologists, Van Gennep and Victor Turner, and the many anthropologists who write about it, but working with shamans and elders in the indigenous world who took me on rites of passage and helped guide me through these. And I would say that it was. It came at a time in my life that I would say if I didn't have those rights at that time, if I didn't have an elder working with me with those rights, I just don't know where I'd be today. It helped me survive my life. It was a very transformational time in my life, that transformations I didn't choose, like divorce and these kinds of things that and I had resigned from the ministry. So it was working with these elders and shamans who helped me to get into the deep wisdom and knowledge of how to survive these ordeals that life puts us through. And in the pre-civilized cultures, this is what I learned and was always interested and charmed by. They do everything with ritual. They have little rituals that they design and perform for absolutely everything, for the biggest rites of passage in life to the tiniest serving of a meal or hunting or fishing or conversation or waking up in the morning or going to bed at night. There's always these rituals that they perform and develop. And it's, it's forever the posture of addressing the larger reality that we all inhabit, the invisible world, the world that supports us from the places beyond what our five senses are in touch with. So the rituals always kept them in constant conversation with the invisible realm. And, what I came to understand, that's why I called my chapter The Language of Ritual, is that it's a language. And through the rituals that we perform, we are speaking to the invisible world. And then the invisible world speaks to us by designing rites of passage. And that's one of the reasons I chose this topic is when destiny chooses your rite of passage. And it isn't something that, some shaman gave you a prescription for. It's like the universe steps in and designs it. And I'll tell you some stories that how I came to realize that's how it works. The universe is like on it and speaks in this language very profoundly. But the thing that they articulate, like Jung said in ritual, you are connecting the conscious with the unconscious. So consciously, you're performing a ritual. The unconscious realm then comes into play with what you're doing consciously. So you're connecting that. And I think of it as connecting the right brain with the left brain. The left brain is doing one thing, the right brain is now engaged and open. And so you're balancing that. And then I also think of it, I'm very interested in the origins of consciousness. So I think of the ritual, even the simplest rituals that we do, as uniting the sort of more recently developed brain and modes of thinking with the older brain. That is, part of our original structure in DNA that's often shut out and not listened to and not awakened. And but ritual works with the older brain as well. And I think all of us feel in a well-performed ritual that we've contacted something so deep in the self and the earth that is part of that older brain knowing and wisdom. And it's amazing the potency and the power of ritual to create that connection. So it's like that. And one of the simplest rituals that I do every day that is so powerful is when I get up in the morning. I might turn on a dim light, but I light candles on my altar, and that's how I start the day. And even if I just have to, get right at it, I will sit for some time with just the lit candles. And my gesture is invoking the invisible realm to be with me. I'm acknowledging it through the fire, through the candle, and inviting it for collaborating with me through my day. And it can be as something as simple as that. It doesn't go with, if I have time, I have things I love to do that, yeah, readings that I do. I've been reading the New Testament. I've been reading the Quran every morning as I can, enjoying learning the beautiful ritual of reading these scriptures in the morning. But if I don't, if nothing else, just doing something simple like that to acknowledge the other world will engage you with it for the day. And I wanted to share this dream that I had, and many of you who know me know that dreams are they are my passion. They've guided my life from very early in life. And so this is one of the dreams that I had that I think speaks of the potency and the power of ritual itself. Um, so in this dream, this would have been, this was when I was still a minister. I was still married, so it would have been lots of years ago, 30 some years ago. Um, And in the dream, I had this concern. I was doing my doctoral work, so it was when I was thinking about ritual. Um, I had this concern, and I decided to design a little ritual to engage the universe in helping me with this concern. And so I don't know what it was. And when I woke up, I didn't know what the concern was, but I knew that this was happening and that I designed this little ritual. I was by this big, beautiful lake and right next to a tree, performed my little ritual. And just as I was performing my little ritual, this massive thing, like the size of an island on Earth, came flooding like through the sky like an airplane and landed in the lake next to me. It was like a huge island landed in the lake, and it was all this material from the other world, from outside of the Earth. And I knew that it had a tremendous value and blessing for our Earth. Here it came and it landed in this lake, and I was absolutely in awe. And then, as things can happen, the island that was this way flipped over. And then I knew because it was flipped over that it was going to be ruined, that whatever the potencies of that were for the earth now were maybe going to, maybe the water was going to ruin or destroy them. And I was like, oh no, it turned over. And then this huge hand, like the size of a three-story building, came up out of the lake and turned it over. And then I was like, wow. I mean, I can still feel it in my body, the wowness of all this. And then it flipped back over again. And then the hand came up and righted it again. And I was holding my breath through all this. So this happened 3 times, and finally it was stabilized. And then I knew that all of this energy and potency and medicine that had come from another dimension was now here for us, and we would have it now. And then I had the realization in the dream that the reason this came and was saved from destruction was because of my tiny little ritual that I did by the tree. And I felt like my psyche was saying, these little rituals that you do, you have no idea what the power and the potency is of these little rituals. Um, and I have lived with that ever since. I just never doubt. It's when you get a dream like that, you don't doubt it. I never doubt. So all of us should know this power that is available to us in our sincere efforts to engage the energies of the invisible realms and work with them through our just simply beautifully, heartfully designed little rituals. Um, so, uh, yeah, and so I wanted to talk about, I feel the energy of that dream so powerfully, I almost can't move on.
Yeah, I think we should pause because
Yeah, like,
I
whoa.
am just sitting here like with a whole heap of things to say, but I saw
Oh, please
Kathleen's
say
face
them.
too. I saw
Yes,
Kathleen's
do.
face, so I'm going to invite Kathleen in to speak into what was being evoked for her.
Yeah, just the power of that hand. It just made me realize that and want to emphasize how much power we hold in these beautiful hands that can do such intricate creativity and then like can flip the paradigm literally. Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that.
And,
Yes.
and that rich and on a personal level, I've often thought that addiction is can be related to ritual and the lack of the sacred is just
Yes.
a
Yes.
yearning to have the sacred and the ritual of smoking or whatever it is. So it's just like oh, I get chills. It's like we're just wanting to return to the sacred, all of us. And you've just shown us through the dream that we have
We,
all this
we
power.
have these powers.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a beautiful insight, and I've thought of it many times too. Often addiction is our longing and our yearning, and we haven't been trained in these ways. Yeah, I think it's a sign of our times that we haven't engaged the rites of passage, the appropriate rites of passage for uh, at all ages, so that the longing for it goes into our addictions. And
Mm.
that's a beautiful insight, Kathleen. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, because that's such an incredible insight, is that then, my own experience relating to kind of addiction is that then you continue to kind of try and try and try and try, but you never are sated. You never have the satiation from the thing that you're trying to bring in because of that. Um, Perhaps it's the lack of the consciousness that you were talking about, bringing the unconscious and the consciousness together, Taria. And I have to also say, as seems to have happened through this all these interviews, this dream that you had of the lake. Well, yesterday we were talking about with Ryan Nielsen, we were talking about the fairy tale of Iron John, and Iron John lives in a lake that gets
Oh,
emptied out and he gets taken and put in a cage. But the image of that hand from your dream made me think of Iron John, like the instinctual wild man in the lake turning over this island and just kind of coming back into this instinctual nature. It seems somehow connected. Maybe I'm it's a long bow, but it fascinates me in the same way that I'm sure, you know, people would experience in the Dream Symposium, this collective kind of ideas and imagery that starts to emerge. It feels that there's a synchronicity with that dream that you've shared.
I think that's so interesting. I think it's important to look at the coherence of the images as they come through the different speakers and the different myths and the different stories, and that there is that coherence. And I think it's so helpful to notice it and to make it, more conscious and talk about it. So
Yeah.
I
And
love that.
what you were saying about in the dissertation, this language, it made me think, wow, we don't really know the language. And this is part of the work that you do, which is like how do we relearn the language so that these experiences, these dreams, these initiations that or the rites of passage that are designed by destiny, we understand in some way, or maybe it's what we trust what's happening to us. Would you say that's part of understanding the world in this way in terms of rites of passage, like having a language for what's happening to me?
Yes, if I understand your question right, um, so say it again. Just say it real
Is
simply.
it
What's
is
the
it
question?
that is it that kind of this relationship with dreams and image and like that we're trying to what the work that you do is that it's helping us to learn the language that's kind of the language of the universe or the unknown, or this coming into relationship through ritual is part of that learning the language so that when the rites of passage happen, we don't feel kind of maybe victimized by what's happening, that we have
Right,
some kind of understanding, or like you said, a relationship to the invisible.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I have a couple of stories that I can tell about how I knew that I was being spoken to in the language of ritual that I didn't know I'd signed up for. Somewhere in my unconscious, somewhere in my soul and spirit, I had certainly signed up for it, but the universe, uh, engaged me because of I think my deep longing, and then I understood after the event. So I'll tell a couple of them, but
Yes,
that
please.
oh, this was a beautifully, perfectly designed rite of passage. So yeah, before I go to that, let me just talk about the stages of the rite of passage, which is how I recognized it. Um, and so some of these anthropologists will explain and my indigenous elders explained very beautifully that there are different stages of the rite of passage, but in almost every culture, there are three that we can point to that are uh, what do I want to say, similar, or that are the same. And the first one is separation. In order for a rite of passage to be that, it takes you out of your familiar environment. Now, this can be psychologically, it doesn't have to be physically. So, we look at it at all the different levels. But if we look at it, let's just look at it at a profound sort of like physical level. You leave your familiar environment. Like in Australia, when you go on the walkabout, you left behind mom and dad and, kitchen and bathroom and all that, and you've gone out. And you're out there in the wilderness and you're having an experience that way and learning to engage it. If you go on a vision quest, you leave behind all those things and you go out into the wilderness and you stay in the wilderness. Sometimes you might uh, go on a sacred pilgrimage and leave everything behind and go and have this experience. So it's the separation from everything that's familiar to you that is the first stage of the rite of passage. The second stage of the rite of passage is what they call the liminal space. That's when you enter the space where you're experiencing and learning, and it's something new. When you go on a vision quest, you don't know what's going to arrive. You don't know what animals are going to arrive. You don't know what weather is going to arrive. You don't know what psychological weather is going to happen. You don't know what spirits are going to talk to you. You don't know. And so you're in that liminal space. And there's something transformational about just putting yourself in the openness to that uncertainty of what's going to arrive. And we all know this, and we even when we go on a sacred pilgrimage, we know that we're going to, I don't know, whatever it is, that stone circle or that temple or that church or that place in nature or mountain, but you don't know what's going to happen when you get there. You don't know how it's going to address you. You don't know how you're going to feel. You don't know who you're going to meet along the way. So you go into that sort of liminal space where all those things happen. And then you gather up all of those things. You've left, you've gathered up, your experiences. And then the last stage of the rite of passage is the return. And the elder that I worked with from Nigeria told me, if you don't have the return stage of the rite of passage, nothing happened. It didn't, none of it matters. It doesn't take, basically. And so the return is having your village see you and acknowledge you in that you have had this experience. So when I did, for example, one 10-day vision quiz, this isn't one of the ones I'm going to tell. This is one I designed. I'll tell you the ones that the universe designed, but this is one of the ones I designed. He told me I went out for 10 days in the wilderness. I've done this twice, about 5 or 6 years apart. He told me, have your village come meet you on the night you come back out of the wilderness and have a festival, have food, have stories, have a gathering where they speak to you, you speak to them. And once you're seen and acknowledged in your village for what you've been through, then the ritual takes. And he said, if you don't do that, it doesn't take. So, speaking of what you mentioned, Kathleen, of these rites of passage that people seek, but unconsciously because we don't have them well designed for our culture. Like a child runs away from home. They go through the separation, they go through the liminal space, but then they're shamed and not acknowledged when they get back, and the ritual didn't take. And sometimes they never come back, and then it's not the same. So it's like we have to be so conscious of how to make these so that the transformation of consciousness can really take place because it has to. It's like life is an ordeal, and we have to embrace it as it embraces us. Okay, so now I'll move to you guys comment, and then I'll move to the other stories.
I'm struck as I was
Yeah.
listening to you speak, Taria, that last part. of the rite of passage is so missing. Like as you were talking, I was like, wow, yeah, that part. Like it seems that the two other parts you have those happening a lot, but that third part of and then to hear you say, well, that means that it hasn't happened is it's not been integrated. It feels like a tragedy to me. Um,
It is.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
glad you feel that. It's such a loss, I think, of the potential and of the offering. Um, yes, absolutely. And that can happen like, well, one of the things we just went to Egypt with Jocelyn Starfeather. I was just on a beautiful pilgrimage with her, and that was certainly a rite of passage for all of us. We had a massive experience there. And it had the separation and it had all the liminal space of all of our experiences there. But, I really tried to communicate to our little group, follow the ritual, have your people, tell them your story, have them see you and acknowledge you for the transformation that has taken place. And sometimes that's not easy. People come back and nobody cares, or you just go back to work. You don't have that return ritual, and it doesn't hold the potency and the power of that transformation in the same way unless you do it. So that's something we have to create for ourselves. And every time I've done something like this, I have made sure to do that after I learned that from that Nigerian shaman that I worked with. And it really does make a difference. So I had some friends over, we talked about it, we acknowledged it, they celebrated with me, and sat by a fire on one of the other occasions when I came back. And just it's really, I really can't impress upon your listeners enough to do that third one. The first two happen often, and then the third one, unless that happens, you haven't completed it.
wow,
And like you said, it's a tragedy, it's a loss.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
And what comes through for me is it's a witnessing. It's a witnessing of just being witnessed. And what stems from that is like what happens like when humans are not witnessed. Like
Yes.
especially with children, they'll just get louder and louder and they seem to be seen as acting out, but they're just wanting to be witnessed. So it seems like it's such a core integral value of the human being to just have someone hold that space for you to share and vice versa, to have that reciprocation. It's such a beautiful reciprocation to receive this transmission that you've bought from the temples of Egypt for the friends who you had over for dinner for them. Like there's a beauty that's lost when we can't have that witnessing, that sharing of it.
And it needs, yeah, it's so important. And I'm just thinking of little kids who go off to camp. It's a rite of passage, but if they're not invited to share their stories, be witnessed in their stories, ask questions about their experience, regarded for the maturity that they had to go through those things out in the wilderness and away from mom and dad, unless they get that return, you lose some of the potency that's possible there. Um, yeah. I graduated from a little Catholic high school, and they had us go before graduation. This was a lovely little thing. They had us go and spend a night in a monastery all alone and do a 24-hour silent retreat. And that was so beautiful. Here I was, what, 17 years old. I'd never done that, been away from mom and dad in that kind of way and in a sacred place. And we ate in silence and with the monks. I mean, there wasn't anybody else there. And then in my room by myself, it was so powerful. But nobody ever asked me. They didn't do the return. It was years later that I thought, that was lost. Nobody asked me, what was that like? And witnessed me in it. And it's a shame that they didn't know to do that. They knew to send us there, but they didn't know how to do the return. So, yeah.
Taria, it makes me, as you're talking, it makes me think it's that witnessing, like Kathleen said, and the regard, that word that you use, the regard for the experience that makes it's almost in that exchange or in that relating that it becomes real. That experience becomes real, but without that regard, without that witnessing, that huge experience, it doesn't have the same realness or something like that. And that
It-
then that gift of that experience isn't brought back into community, into culture, as Michael Mead often talks about as well. It's just, yeah, thank you for sharing
it's
that.
like a stillbirth or something almost, sadly.
Yeah, I was going to say the frequency is missing. Like
Uh,
like there's this potential to like have a quantum shift around it for all involved and to ripple out, but it's that's the vibration is never quite, yeah, it's like you said, that's still the heartbeat isn't there.
yes, yeah. And I'm just thinking now as we're talking about this that there's probably a resurrection and a repair that can happen, just like, my little high school experience when I talked about it 20 years later and realized that had never taken place, then I could sort of restore the potency and the power of what happened. So I think that, later in life, if you realize that you never got that third element of the rite of passage, do it now. Speak up, be seen, have the conversations with your loved ones, your friends who honor you, and complete it, bring it to life in a new way, be witnessed in it and witness yourself in it. Um, so
That's
yeah.
just absolutely beautiful. Which kind of takes us into your stories, Taria. So tell us, please tell us.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's kind of what I was going to tell when I said then destiny designs it for you. It was like I was interested in all these elements of the rites of passage, but then um, w- w- I've got two stories, and they both happened in Africa, interestingly. Um, One is I went to Africa. This would have been back in, I think, 1997. And I was on this journey with Wangari Maathai, and she was sort of doing an intercultural exchange where we came and learned about their culture, and we were there present to, for them to learn about our culture. It was beautiful. Um, and we went out into this village. She had village stays for each of us, where we went into by couples. There were four of us that went into this village. My ex-husband and I were married at the time, and another couple. And to just stay. And these are villages they have never, ever had modern amenities of any kind. There's no plumbing, there's no electricity, never has been for all generations and generations. They don't know what it's like to live in the modern way at all. I don't know what they even do for money. I think it's just all exchange. It was so powerful and so profound to go and be hosted in a village of these people. When I got off the bus, when I arrived, like literally was putting my foot on the ground, getting off the bus when they were leaving us off there, a tooth that my dentist had said, maybe we're going to need a crown to do a root canal on this, but we'll wait and see what happens. Well, my tooth decided to signal to me that it was time for the root canal. And I had this shooting pain that went through my head for the 5 days that I was in the village. The entire 5 days I was in this village, I had this shooting pain in my head. And it was it was so phenomenal. Like when I got home, my dentist said, "You were seeing the Holy Grail, right?" And I said, "Yes, yes." Um, and so, and there was another dentist who had, or not a dentist, a doctor who had had some codeine who was in another village, and they told him about, what was I was going. So there, somebody was able to bring me a little, like, and it was kind of an alteration. It was a little weird drug. It was a painkiller, but it made me kind of groggy, so I wasn't sure whether to even use it or not. But the thing was, is that it was so powerful, so profound. I could tell you 100 stories, and I won't right now, of how beautiful it was to be there. I mean, it was, those people were so beautiful. We got to be in their kitchen huts where they have the fires and the children are blowing air through the reeds to keep the fire going while the women are chopping and cooking in this big cauldron and the elder women are standing by. And we chopped wood, we went into the gardens, we carried water from the river, we did all these things. I was as dirty and tired as I've ever been, and I'd never felt more alive or more joyful, even with this pain going on. And I climbed over this fence and got this big cut on my leg, so I got a scar on my leg. And so we had this whole experience, and then on the fifth day, they picked us up. And just as I was stepping on the bus, now you can't make this stuff up. Just as I was stepping on the bus to get back on, the tooth stopped hurting. It was over. And my dentist later described that was the nerve dying. And once it's dead, it's dead. It's done. It's not gonna, it can't hurt you anymore because it's dead. And so that's what happened. So then I knew that's what signaled me. Somebody designed this, that it would strike the minute I stepped off the bus, and that it would stop the minute I stepped back on the bus. And then I started looking into my literature about the rites of passage. And here was this extreme separation. This wasn't just separation from the United States, this was separation from everything modern, everything, absolutely everything modern. And parts of the rites of passage are often the infliction of pain. There's a pain involved, like the Sundance rituals and some of these where you go through extreme pain. And then some of them are scarification. So you come away with a scar on your body so that you always have this signal that you have been through this rite of passage. And so when I got home, I looked into this literature and I thought the universe, it had absolutely every element I could find about a perfectly designed rite of passage. And I didn't create it. Somebody created it for me. And I thought, okay, thank you. But I will say that within 3 months after that, my oldest daughter left for a year to go to Austria. She was on an international study with my sister. So my 14-year-old daughter left. My 9-year-old daughter got diabetes, and my ex-husband started an affair. Not to my knowledge, but I didn't find out for a year and a half later. So within 3 months of getting home after that rite of passage, my whole life blew up, basically. I had a daughter who was gone, a husband who was absent, and a daughter and another daughter who was suddenly insulin dependent, and we were working on that. And everything changed. You can imagine the transformation of consciousness that so I thought, be careful when these rites of passage come because they have an intention for you. And I am the person now that I am because I went through these things. So I don't know what our timing is now. I don't know if I can even tell the second story, but that was a big one.
I think we've got time. Kathleen, what do you think?
I think we have time as well, but just want to witness that story first, Tara, and how that pain was preparing you in a way. That's what I feel. That pain was preparing you for what was to come and to show you that you are stronger than you realize and that you can withhold so much. And I think that's so important, the resilience of a human spirit, of us, of how we can overcome and not so often we're like made, but also make ourselves feel that there's something wrong with us or to shame our body or like, why is this happening to me? But how you've just reframed it is like it's a rite of passage and it prepares us for something greater than we have knowledge of.
Mm.
That is so beautiful, Kathleen, and I've never thought of that, that the pain that I experienced in my head was like the pain that I experienced emotionally and psychologically later, and that the pain prepared me to know that I can survive it. I never thought of that, and you're right. That's a really, really beautiful insight. Yes.
And
So,
yeah,
there's something in these rites that they just know what they're doing. It's amazing, isn't it? And the tooth in the dream is about death, and it was the death of a life. It was the death of a whole life as I had known it. And the beginning of the next one. It's the psyche then regrows and something else is born. Um,
there's something in that story, Taria, about, like you said, the pain that you're experiencing, but also the most alive that you've ever felt, or a real aliveness and a joy and an like the experience itself that you were holding these opposites. That
yes.
seems an important part of the story too, that and I wonder if that's also connected to what Kathleen said around this awareness of like what we actually have capacity for, that
Yes.
these things exist at the same time, that it's you have this lived experience of that as demonstration for moving into the next stage. Would you say that, that's been your experience?
Yes, absolutely. And what I remember from those days in the village is all of the experiences that I had there, not the pain. Even though the pain was acute and in some sense unforgettable, but it did not diminish in any way. And I think that's for us to know that, as we are delivered these ordeals in life, that the aliveness that we allow ourselves to experience around it and in spite of it and sometimes because of it is the value that we then realize that we can live. Um,
Mm.
and I think these are chaotic times we're in right now. We may need to remember these things, that there will be, times that we need to know that in the midst of all this chaos to that we can experience this immense connection and joy. And we must and we will.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you like to share your other story with us?
Yeah, I won't at such length, but I will, it's just very interesting that this happened like 20, probably 5 years later. And this was in 2022. And again, it was in Africa, and it was the first time I went to Egypt. I just went to Egypt in February. That's the trip that I referred to. First time I went to Egypt. I had an experience there again, and I began to understand only when I was in the midst of it that here we go again. I'm in Africa and I'm having this experience where there's a rite that's been designed for me that I didn't anticipate at all. And so what happened is I got quite ill. I was about 4 or 5 days into the pilgrimage, and just excited about. I went to Abydos and these temples and meeting the people on the pilgrimage together. It was so joyful and fascinating, and so much to learn. And then I got extremely ill, like extremely ill. Um, I remember sitting in a restaurant with Jocelyn, and I was saying, "Why is it so cold in this restaurant?" I thought I was in a freezer, not a refrigerator, but a freezer. And she said, "It's not cold in here." And then I knew, oh my God, my body's something's happening. And then I started shaking, and then I went into this illness. So then I was in the illness for like 3 days, and I thought, well, it'll pass, and then I'll get back on my feet back on the ground, and I'll experience the rest of the pilgrimage. But it was very intense, and I went to a place where I went into a chamber of death. All the life left my body. I realized in my body that there was no life left in it. There was no energy. I thought it takes energy to breathe. It takes energy to think. I didn't have any energy. Energy was gone. It was complete. I was gone. And I wasn't afraid. I was like, oh, okay, so this is what this is. And I went into that. And then sometime after that, I came back and I was breathing again and I was all right. But then I knew I had to go home because this was bigger than it wasn't just a little 3-day flu or whatever. It was like I needed to go home. So then I got on an airplane. We were in the south of Egypt. I went to the back up to Cairo. And again, like what happened on the bus, all of a sudden on the airplane, I felt fine. It's like I got myself to it, was going to go back to North Carolina, and I'm on the airplane up to Cairo, and I started, here I am. I'm fine. So I just left the group in South Egypt and I was up north. So I decided to wait for them. They were coming back like 5 or 6 days later. Oh, and this is another thing. In the rites of passage, it's 5 days. That's one of the things that they say in the literature. It's usually 5 days, and it was 5 days I was in the village. And this was 5 days then. Now I was up in Egypt for 5 days and I went to Giza. And so I just stayed by myself in this funky little hotel next to, and I wandered the plateau where the pyramids are every day for 5 days while I was integrating this death experience. And then I realized this is what ancient Egypt is all about. They take you into the realm of death and then they bring you back. That's what all of those death rituals were about. And my guides designed it for me. Like I went there, I went into death, and then I was brought back. And now I'm at the pyramids integrating it for 5 days before the rest of the crowd came back. And I knew by the time I was in Giza, I thought, this is it. This is another one of those. And it's in Africa again. It's interesting. There's some kind of covenant my soul has with that continent. So I went through that rite of passage. It was a perfect rite of passage. And thank goodness, the changes when I got home weren't as dramatic as the last time. It was more in my psyche and my consciousness and in other ways that I went through the uh, return. And I had some friends of mine very kindly had a fire and held my whole experience. And I did have a perfect rite of return when I got back from that one. So, um, anyway, so that is kind of what I wanted to talk to you about is the universe will design these for you. It's important to know that ritual and rites of passage are essential and important and have been since the beginning of our human experience. And so it's good to reclaim that and then to acknowledge that sometimes they design it for us and they will take us by surprise. But when we recognize it and acknowledge it and work with it, those are the most potent and powerful rituals that just to receive. So trust it. And sometimes it's going to be a death. Sometimes it'll be a divorce. Sometimes it'll be something awful. Sometimes it'll just be what? An illness or something. It doesn't have to be something awful, but it'll be something radical. And that's one of the Nigerian shaman said to me, he said, it's time for radical ritual. I remember him pounding his hand on the table and saying, we're going to do some radical ritual here. And so, yeah, so sometimes the rituals are radical and the transformation is radical too. And it's brilliant and beautiful. So,
Thank you, Taria. There's something in this about working with the how does Jung say it? The prima materia, like the it's like
yes,
of what you've said. That was the first kind of words that came in. Like um here is what we can take from this, which is how we work with these things that feel so unfamiliar or so frightening, or even it made me think about how we work with frightening dreams. It's like there's
right.
something in always there's it's the capacity to work with what is perhaps sometimes the most difficult thing that we're experiencing or have experienced at that time. And Kathleen, I
I,
saw you, yeah, I saw you there too, so I want to invite you in to just share as well.
yeah, I love that about the prima materia. That's totally exactly perfect insight into that. Yeah. So, dear Kathleen, what were you thinking?
I was thinking a couple of things. One was like how important it is to follow that calling. Like your soul was calling you to go to Africa, and your soul was calling you to go to Egypt, and you experience these big initiations in Africa, and I can feel the connection there. But it feels like if we shut down a calling that we have, we're going to go through the rite of passage in some way, shape, or form, but we will miss some of that power to do that alchemy, that transformation to become. And I just feel like what you've shared so encompasses what metamorphosis is about is honoring, have that permission for the threshold, permission for the initiation, like the honoring of it rather than writing it off as something shit that happened when I was in Egypt. Like what you've just shared is so powerful and empowering. Yeah.
Absolutely empowering. You trust the universe to take care of it. Right. And I love what you say about the calling. It's like answer the call. It's something to recognize the call when it comes and have the fortitude and the courage to answer.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
yeah.
Taria, I wonder if you had any kind of closing thoughts or advice for people who are sort of considering everything that we've talked about today.
Well, that's a good question. There's one thing that's occurring to me is just going back to the engagement with the most simple daily rituals and knowing that those rites of passage, those simple things are transforming our connection to these huge powers and potencies in the most important way. Like my little dream said, I just did a little ritual by the lake, because of some little concern I had. And then all of this energy came and it has, and I knew it had a big effect for the larger whole. So, and some of the psychologists that I work with talked about ritual a lot and would say that it comes, you design the ritual. You don't have to go to a book of rituals and on page 129 is the ritual for something. It's like it comes through you like a dream comes through you. You dream it up and you do it yourself. And you come to the ways that you create the rituals that are appropriate to the moment. Whether it's, I don't know, writing something on a piece of paper and blowing your spirit into it and then putting it in the earth or in the water or whatever it is. But you think of the things that are the rituals that you can do to address whatever is, you know, the simple things in your life, like getting up in the morning, or the more complex things like what do I do about this thing? Just create your rituals and know that you have the capacity, that it's an inherent capacity and instinct that we have to create these rituals and to re-engage, those kind of things that we weren't just taught, unfortunately, in our larger culture, that this is what you do to engage the powers. This works, and you design it. There will be, customary rituals that we all do, the meals for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it is, those are rituals and they're beautiful. But, in terms of our own sort of intentions and questions and concerns, we can get really creative about the ritual. Just ask your older brain, the other parts of yourself to kick in and guide us along the way as we do this. And just know that this language is a very very potent language that we can reclaim and recover that we've kind of lost. It's a language that's been lost. And we can relearn it easily. It's instinctual. It's just in us to do. So,
Taria, thank you. What a reminder. My heart is so full. And as you were talking, I was thinking, it made me think about something I'd kind of learnt from body dreaming, which was that bringing the consciousness to the act is
Mm.
actually how we feel the nourishment of it. And as you were talking about these rituals, I was like, oh my goodness, because we're all kind of longing for that nourishment. And then for you to say, like, we don't need to turn to page 129 for the prescription, it can come from us. That's such a liberating uh, direction, invitation to be able to imagine into. So I just feel so grateful for that and for
And
this.
I've done body dreaming with you, Vive, and I think that is a ritual, just a session with you. And it's not something that you go to page 129 to get. You call it out of the session, out of the energy of the session, the center, and the body of the person that you're working with. Your own body responds with ideas, and so it's a very organically created rite of passage that you do.
Mm.
Yeah. And even a dream can be a rite of passage. It separates you from your ordinary consciousness. It gives you this liminal thing. And when you tell it, you are giving it the return when you live it and tell it. So even that can be a very important ritual and rite of passage, just a really powerful dream. But your body dreaming is that too. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Kathleen, I just wanted to invite you in just to bring this to a close and also to share about Taria's beautiful free gift.
Oh, yes, Tara, please share your beautiful free gift with our wonderful audience shortly. But I just, as you were speaking, I really just wanted to mention our interview with Puma Freddy Signona because he spoke about at when you get to the end of your life is breathing into a rock or a crystal of what your last breath, what you want to leave your last breath, your last words
Oh,
into
how
the world.
beautiful.
And that's what was coming through as you were sharing about it. And for me, that feels like the return as well. We take our first breath into the world as that newborn, and then we take our last breath, and our last breath is kind of that return of what do we want to leave in the world as a reminder to everyone, like what do we want our last word to be, and breathe it into the stone of a crystal. And so I just feel like we were talking about the weaving between the interviews and how powerful it is that we're in this field and all like speaking to the same things in just in a different language.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that so much. I have like little rocks that I think I want to breathe into this and give it to my grandson when I'm going. I hope I remember to do that, just like everything that I want you to carry with you into your future. I have actually even thought of that. I'm so glad you said that. That's so beautiful. And my goodness, I can't wait to hear that interview. I admire that souls with all my whole being. My goodness, you guys got to talk to him. Can't wait to hear.
Yeah, but please tell us about your free gift because it's so generous, Tari. And yeah, we want everybody to come into your world and receive more.
Okay, well, I decided to give you there's a podcast that I did with Jocelyn Starfeather. It's called Don't Think, Reflections on the Nature of Thought. And that's going into this uh, the time the dimensions of our mind before thought, the older brains, the ways that before any concepts or language, there's this ancient knowing and wisdom that I reflected on in this interview, and I brought lots of quotes from lots of people like Einstein and Bohm and Buckminster Fuller and so many of my mentors and guides about their thoughts about this subject, and gave some of my own reflections and meditations upon it. So it's an interview that you might enjoy that goes along with kind of what we've been contacting today and these thoughts. And so, yeah, so it's there. And if you sign up for that, you can get on my mailing list, and I'll be happy to have you part of my community. Um, yeah. And then there's
Sounds
the Dream Symposium. I think you can put the link to that up. I do a monthly global dream symposium also with Jocelyn. So everybody's welcome to come to those, and we listen to the collective dreaming mind,
mm.
and everyone is welcome.
Taria, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, my co-weaver, Kathleen. And I just highly recommend connecting with Taria, getting on her list. I've been doing dream work with Taria for maybe over 2 years now, and I think it's fair to say it has completely changed my life being in relationship with my dream.
Oh,
So,
oh, wow.
yeah, I would say connect with Taria, check it out, watch the talk, or you will love it. So, thank you again, Taria, and thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, and blessings to all.